Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Raven, and today I'd like to share my experience with you on healing. So, my healing journey consciously started sometime last year in the fall. And here we are in winter of the following year. I basically had gone through, some major changes in my life. More basically changes that had to do with fighting something that was ending. And I think, for one, it was hard for me to accept that something was ending, and this has to do with my career, that I feel like I sacrificed so much time and energy and frustration. So anyways, I felt called to consciously address like why I was so attached to that career. I felt called to maybe better understand myself so that I could, get out of this cycle of depression and like low self-esteem and just like self-hate, insecurity. I don't know, you name it, all kinds of things. But as I said in my adoption story, I kept coming to these very dark points in my life, and I couldn't control them at all. I would just be stuck in this like slump of hating myself, basically. Like, that's the bottom line. I can only smile about it now because I understand that healing was needed, Like, now I understand why I kept coming to that point. So I picked up this book, 13 Moons, the original Clan Mothers. I got it used on Amazon last fall. And at first when I got it, I was like, well, this will be good for me to, reconnect with the moon and strengthen my connection to the moon cycles and really live the journey, right? But little did I know that it was going to like I was totally going to be in sync with this book. Like, I was not expecting that when I bought it. Like I said, I bought it used. This book is like 20 years old probably. And, I was like, well, some of it might be out of date, some of it might not. But no, there's nothing out of date in this book. Nothing. Everything is applicable. 1,000 years ago, it's applicable today. So if you can snatch one up, use somewhere, or if you're lucky enough to find one at a Goodwill or somewhere, or I've actually been noticing a lot of antique stores have been selling native authors and native books at like high prices. And I don't know, I mean, I guess it's collectible in a sense, but it's really, for me, become like so meaningful, so special, like something I can't imagine my life without. And it feels like something that I could read over and over and over and find something new. So, anyways, back to my journey. So, I kept coming to these dark places, and I mean like really dark, like, you know, something that you can't shake. And if you've dealt with depression ever in your life, like, it's totally 100% depression, but it's also depression with heavy thoughts of suicide, basically. Um, and it's not new. It's not new for me. It's something that I've dealt with for at least the last, well, so when I was a teenager, I used to think that way, but not to the extent that I have more recently. Um, so in February, I started to realize that there was a connection between my depression and my dark places. And the reason that I felt I was going to those dark places, what I made the connection to was not accepting myself and not fully dealing with, for me, what I feel like was a major turning point in my life. And I basically made the connection to the fact that I never accepted being adopted and like having a whole nother set of parents who I didn't know, and never really having a chance to meet my birth mother because she died when I was, I think, 20, 18 or 20, somewhere around there. And again, I don't know all this information. I'm only going off of what I've learned about my birth mother through finding things out myself. And I really kind of started looking for more information about 7 years ago ish, somewhere around there, like 2012, maybe. No, must have been after that, maybe 2015. So somewhere around there. And I've always sort of thought about it, but essentially I shut that part of my life off, right? And I realized that I never fully accepted that situation. I never accepted having a white mother. I never accepted having a different father. I never accepted, I just kind of pretended like it didn't happen. And I just kept going through my life. And I think what I'm discovering now is like every emotion that you hold on to, every big event that happens, big or small even, event that happens in your life, and if you don't fully acknowledge it or you don't express that emotion, that grief, that happiness, that joy, that sadness, it stays with you. And I'm one of those people who totally holds on to things. Like I hold on to things for way too long. Or sometimes I'm the opposite. Like I'll just spit it out and, you know. But so I started to realize that there was a connection between me hating myself and me not accepting who I was, and me not processing being adopted, and me like not being able to go back and like it's not like I could just wake up and decide, okay, today I'm gonna go look for my birth mother because she's not there. She died over 20 years ago. So I think that's something that I just really started to regret. And there's obviously way more to the story, but um a few years ago, I found out that I had two siblings out there, um, that I had never known about before any of this. So my sister had been trying to contact me on Facebook, and because we weren't friends, I guess I never got the message. Um, this was old Facebook, like, you know, but finally I ended up connecting with her. I don't even really remember how I got her number, but I think what it was is I was finally able to open the messages on Messenger from her. Um, and she gave me her number, and I think I just took a chance and reached out through the Messenger app, and she responded. And like at first I was like, this girl can't be my sister, Like, no. We don't really look that much alike. Like, I don't really recognize her, just like being dumb. So anyways, we figured out, yes, obviously we were sisters, but um she told me that there was a brother, and I had never known for 30 some years that I had a brother and a sister. So that brought up a whole nother set of issues, because I felt like if I had a brother and a sister out there who were close to my age, and my dad and my mom, my adopted parents, knew that I had been looking for my past, why didn't they never tell me that I had a set of siblings? So that was a whole nother issue, right, that I had to deal with. But anyways, I just took it for what it was. I kept communicating with my sister, and eventually we ended up meeting up, like, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months later, whatever. So I met her and my brother, and it's crazy because we all kind of look alike, and it's just crazy to me that you could be related to this whole group of people and not even know it, like, not even, like, if I would have seen her out somewhere, like, I wouldn't be like, oh wow, she looks strangely familiar, or she looks like me, or, I don't know. um so I started uncovering that I have a huge abandonment issue. um and like, it was really affecting more so my relationship more than it was affecting anything else. So my marriage with my husband, and, like, I don't know, the last few years, like, I just started to get really, like, jealous and insecure and, like, afraid that he was gonna leave me, or like he was gonna find someone else, or like I wasn't good enough. So, like, a whole abandonment 101, And I was never really conscious of this before. I wasn't really conscious that, oh, if you've been rejected by your parents, if you've been adopted, if you've been neglected, if you've been, ever in a bad situation, basically as a child, you carry that wound with you into your adulthood, and you carry that wound into your relationships. You carry that wound in your role as a parent, even, Um, so, I just started to figure out that this was like way more of a big deal than I initially had imagined, right? Because, you know, when you don't deal with things and you just suck it all up and you're an emotional person, like, you just become blocked, basically. Like, you just become a blocked vessel. And I couldn't really talk to my parents about any of this because they don't talk about anything. Like, my parents are from the old school. They were both born in the 40s, so really don't talk about their problems. They have lots of secrets. I'm sure that, things people just don't know. But that's that generation, and that's the generational trauma that happened to them and the way they handle things. Doesn't mean that it has to be mine, you know? So I started on the healing journey, like I said, and I started to remember things that I hadn't thought about in years. So I started to vividly remember when my parents told me that I was adopted. And I was like, whoa, like, that's where all of this shit comes from. That's where this comes from, like, that moment. This comes from that day. This comes from that year. This comes from that time. This comes from my childhood when, I was supposed to be going to high school and like deciding what I was going to do with my life. And obviously, none of that stuff happened for me because after my parents told me that I was adopted, I like completely shut down. Like, I just couldn't believe that they had lied to me for all those years. And obviously, it's not like a lie in a sense, like they were lying to me to hurt me in a sense, they were lying to me to protect me and to, keep me in a happy state until, of course, I realized what the truth is. Um, so I I basically, after my parents told me I was adopted, I had like a short period where I was still with them, and I would come home and I would just pretend like nothing happened, like everything was okay or whatever. But then, like, eventually, I just like left. I ran away from home. I didn't want to come back home. I was like, I'm living on the street. I'm going to do my thing. You know, you guys lied to me. You told me, um, you didn't tell me the truth. Like, and now what do I do? Where do I go from here? And then, like, my birth parents, I don't know if they knew that I was told or not or what, but they never really reached out. They never really tried to talk to me about anything. Even though I had made contact with at least my birth father a few times, like just randomly, because I grew up in the city. So he lived in the same city, and I noticed that he would see me and not say anything about anything. He would just be like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" Like checking in, sort of, but not really saying, like, "Oh, I know that that I'm your dad." Like it was never, not even a clue, So again, I don't know if he knew or not. And I know this sounds crazy because you're like, well, why couldn't you just ask him, like, if he was your uncle or he was, whatever. It's like, you're, 15 years old, 16 years old. You're not trying to have deep conversations with your elders, basically. I mean, some people are, but for me, I had already been traumatized and just felt like, you know, I couldn't handle any more truth. So instead, I just chose to avoid, you know, expressing my emotions. Um, so I ended up becoming a runaway, and I was gone for months. Like, my parents had reported me as a runaway, and, I was dodging the police because I didn't want to be caught and go back home. And just because I felt stupid. It wasn't really because I did anything bad or like nothing bad was happening at home at all. Like, nothing ever bad that I can remember ever happened to me. But it was just about being stubborn and being this lost little kid, or teen, basically, lost teen who like thought that she was one thing and then ended up being something totally different. So anyways, so the stigma, right? So I grew up with the stigma about my birth parents, right? Because my dad is actually my uncle. My birth father is actually who I thought was my uncle. And my mother was someone who I thought was just like crazy Aunt April, you know? So I never, and the term crazy, like obviously I know it's not okay to say that, but I'm saying that's how I was raised to think about these two people, is that they had lost their minds, they had done too many drugs, and like they couldn't, function logically. So I grew up thinking like, you know, they just had a bad luck, and they were just like these two loners, Um, but like I said, they never really tried to make a connection with me after they knew that I had known, or I don't know if they knew, but I'm assuming they did because my dad and his brother used to talk fairly regularly, that there's no reason he couldn't have known. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me if he didn't know. And he didn't know that I was a runaway. Like, he knew. Like, they knew. So, anyway, um, knowing that my birth parents both had mental health issues and addiction issues, like, was starting to question, like, in my mind, like, in my mid 30s, like, maybe I was starting to experience some of the things that they experienced also. Um, so I basically just started backtracking from the moment that my parents told me the truth. And I started to realize how I felt and realize that I hadn't really expressed any of those feelings in all of these years. So essentially, I was holding on to all of the sadness, all of the grief, all of the frustration, all of the abandonment stems from back at the age of 15. And I've been through a lot more in my life than this. Like, this is not the end of healing, right? But I realized that this was just the beginning of where um, my problems today stemmed from. And my goal, I think, with this whole little series um, of life events is to somewhat normalize mental health issues, and through reflecting on my own issues, my own past. And I know everybody kind of feels like, oh yeah, the past, just move on from it, don't live in it, don't dwell on it, but I tend to think the opposite. I tend to think that the past really should be honored, and it should be respected, it should be reflected on, um, it should be accepted, right? Accepted. We should be accepting the past eventually. Um, so, yeah, I've had like a whole year of great revelation. I feel like, all of us, like our whole lives are basically about healing, essentially. And either you acknowledge it or you ignore it, right? Because all of us have things that we can heal, things that we can move on from, things that we can learn from. Um, some of us to way worse extents than others. And trust me, I know that this is not like the worst thing that could have happened to me. Obviously, I'm very grateful that my birth parents even wanted me, like that's one thing about adoption, is like you go from a situation where, you know, they don't want you, or your parents don't want you, or can't take care of you, or not financially or physically able to handle, a baby, but then you go into a place that hopefully does want you, You know, it's like the complete opposite situation. It's really the best outcome for me. You know, I was never in foster care or, you know, anything like that, but my siblings were. So I don't share that experience with them. And, you know, obviously I feel horrible about it, but it's like I technically was the oldest child of the three kids that my birth mother had with my birth father. But I think I just started to realize I really hadn't dealt with any of that stuff. And it was resurfacing because I had been going through other difficult issues. And then my mental health really started to struggle and like go downhill, and like really nothing helped. Like I went to therapy for a little while, and it was just kind of like I was talking to an empty, you know, I was talking to a person, but like they couldn't really give me any guidance or couldn't really tell me like how to move through the healing process or how to move past my issues and how to accept myself, really. Um, but again, maybe I wasn't ready, you know, maybe I wasn't ready to hear it. Maybe I wasn't ready to deal with it. And then I obviously tried depression medication. None of that stuff worked. Like it would work for like 6 months, but then I'd be like right back in the same cycle. So, you know, I never really took any meds for like more than a year or maybe a year and a half. Um, so yeah, it took me all these years to figure out like this is where all your issues stem from. And not only that, like it also helped me realize that whatever energies my parents, my birth parents were in when I was born or even when I was conceived, and however much after that I experienced with them, all has affected me unknowingly. So if my parents were high out of their minds when I was conceived, and you know she was pregnant high out of her mind, or whatever the situation is, when I was born she was high out of her mind, like those energies still affect me today. And if I don't acknowledge and accept the way things turned out, um it's just keeping me stuck, and it's keeping me in this cycle that I don't want to be in. So yeah, so I wanted to share like where and why this healing journey started. The first tool that basically helped me start this journey, and I have been through the 13 moons completely, but now I'm restarting sort of where, because when I got the book, I started in the month that I got it. So I think I got it in October. So I started in October and went through the month. And now I'm coming back up to the 12th month. So I did a little bit through the cycle, but um, yeah. So the ravens, they're speaking to this truth that I'm sharing. So with that, I think I'm going to end the video here, and then on my next video, we'll continue the saga. So thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. Till next time.